like why you support the Parthenon marbles. Like, what do you think is the strongest reason for their repatriation?
I think it's an ethical and a moral thing. I think that it's part of the Greek culture, the Greek cultural heritage.
Yeah.
It's part of our legacy. They were illegally acquired and basically they were stolen from Greece, and they belong in the Parthenon. That's where they naturally should be.
And what do you say to those who say it's like a floodgates argument, where if we give back the Parthenon marbles to Greece, some people think, oh, then the British Museum will be completely empty?
Well, it's not going to be empty because it's a quid pro quo, right? So I think what the Greek government has said and what other governments will say as well is we're happy to loan you items to put in the museum. The British Museum, it's a type of what we call an encyclopedic museum, which means they don't necessarily have items of their own history. They have historical items from throughout the world. So I bet that if they return the items that they belong to the other countries are going to be happy to loan them items in here for display.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be an empty museum, not at all.
I mean, look around, right? Like, every single sculpture in this room is part of one unified work of art. Look, 70 meters up here, 70 meters up there. It's one unified work of art. So this isn't a case about returning like a particular picture, a particular cultural artifact. The Acropolis still stands, the Parthenon still stands.
Yeah.
All of these pieces are part of one integrated work of art that belongs at the foot of the monument it was taken from. So half the remaining sculptures are already in the Acropolis Museum, half are here, they belong together. You know, for instance, there are 6 statues, of which one is here in Britain, the other 5 are in Greece. There are sections of the metotope where you have a pectoral of one muscle and shoulder. One half of the sculpture is here in the UK, the other half is in Greece. They obviously belong together.
Right. And to those who want more change, would you say the only way really to do that is to get an amendment to the British Museum Act, or is there another way?
I think there's 2 ways change should come about. The first is the British government could pass legislation which could, in fact, in reality, instruct the British Museum to deaccession these amazing works of art. The alternative is, I think there probably is scope for some kind of arrangement to be struck between the British Museum and the Acropolis Museum. They could see the sculptures partly or wholly returned for long periods of time.
Yeah.
You know, there's been great debate at the moment about the ability to create 3D replicas of the sculptures that could remain here if these were to be repatriated. I also think there's a strong case to say the British Museum could create a remote campus in Athens, and then the sculptures could be returned and housed there.
Right, okay. Thank you, that was awesome.
Elgin, there's always been this kind of mythology, what's always presented as a fact. There was a firman from the Sultan. Everyone talks about this firman, and actually there wasn't what really is a firman with a stamp. It was a letter from some underling of the Sultan. So, you know, this firman actually, Denipaki, it doesn't exist. And here in the museum, in the archive, there's a translation, not the original letter even, but there's a translation into Italian in which Elgin was given permission to do these close-up drawings so that they could be copied back in the UK. And then he thought, actually, no, I think I'll have the originals, and, you know, got people to prize them off very clumsily, literally sort of hack them off. I mean, I think you can probably see the sort of places where they weren't carefully, they were like crowbarred almost. And he was able to do that because he bribed the people who, you know, to turn a blind eye, which has actually been quite a common thing with the theft of, you know, antiquities and archaeological artifacts. You know, in many places around the world, there's some sort of bribery involved, and that's what he did. So he took them illegally, and of course he didn't mean them to come here. He wasn't doing it because he thought, I'm the the ambassador, whatever he was, the consul, and I want to have them for the British Museum, he took them for himself because he wanted to decorate his new house. And when he got home, half of them, as you probably know, this is nothing kind of unknown or sensational. Quite a lot of them went into the sea on the way because the boat sank. What an inept individual. They were already damaged. Then he loses them, some of them in the sea. Which nowadays we'd all know about immediately, but of course news didn't travel so fast then. And then he gets them back to the UK, and he's run out of money. Generally,
he just has to sell them.
So he has to sell them. So he just flogged them and flogged them to the British Museum, which maybe is a fortunate thing. That little bit of the history that they didn't end up. He could have flogged them to anybody who had the money.
Do you think there's a greater movement now towards cultural repatriation?
Definitely. Absolutely 100% sure there is. And, it's understandable that a museum like the British Museum is very, protective and, not doing anything quickly. But other museums around the world are doing this. They're recognising, as someone your age will particularly, this kind of shame about a colonial past that even I grew up and the map was pink. It was British. Anything pink was British, and our mentality has changed enormously since the beginning of the 20th century, and now we're in the 21st century. The education of someone of your generation and now younger generations is questioning much more. We don't just sort of learn about the British Empire like it was a good thing. Britain did give good things to some of the countries that we were, that were in our empire, but we also took a lot. In the last couple of years, with the sort of recognition of our crimes to do with slavery, that's just like a tip. Well, that's a huge iceberg, but it extends into so many other areas, and a feeling also that things have a home. The idea of the museum loaning something that's actually, in my view, not theirs to loan, that's if there's a stubbornness from Greece in that respect, I applaud that, because when Greece is going to be patronised by a loan of something that's actually theirs. So, but also there's something called 3D digital technology. Again, museums can look at that and think, well, that's something extraordinary, that's new, and how do we benefit from that? Because you could have exact replicas of these here. So all this talk about education and putting, they always say, well, there's a story of civilization here. Yes, there is, but you could tell it with 3D technology. You could have copies perfect down to every little mark and blemish, but the originals, these stones, these beautiful marble sculptures, they can go to where they came from.
And they will do.